Welcome to the Sonoma County Drought Update for Thursday, October 13th. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Susan Gorin. I represent the 1st District for Sonoma County. That's mostly Sonoma Valley, but a lot of Santa Rosa as well. And I'm also a member of the Board of Directors for Sonoma Water, which supplies water to 9 cities and special districts that in turn deliver drinking water to more than 600,000 people in Sonoma and Marin counties. Let's begin with a brief message for our Spanish-speaking community, and welcome Sylvia Lemos with our communications team. Take it away, Sylvia.
Ok. Hola, soy Silvia Lemos, especialista en comunicaciones. Esta es la reunión informativa para actualizar al público sobre la emergencia de la sequía. Los expertos ofrecerán lo más reciente sobre las condiciones de la sequía y responderán a sus preguntas. También ofrecerán información sobre los programas de ayuda a los propietarios de pozos privados y sobre los esfuerzos para convertir el condado de Sonoma en la primera región vinícola 100% sostenible del país. Si está participando por Zoom y quiere escuchar la presentación en español, busque y oprima el globo que indica interpretación y seleccione el idioma español. Para los que estén participando por Facebook, puede escuchar la interpretación en español en el canal de YouTube del condado. Puede encontrar el enlace a la publicación de este evento en Facebook. Muchas gracias. Back to you, Supervisor Gorin.
Thank you, Sylvia. This is the 6th of a series of monthly town halls that the county and Sonoma Water are staging over the summer and fall to give you insights into the latest information on our drought and how it's impacting our region. We've assembled a great panel for you today. Since we met with you in September, the National Weather Service has completed a new long-range forecast, and it's concerning. The odds are growing that we will experience La Niña conditions for the 3rd consecutive year, which would lead to yet another dry winter. Brian Garcia, a meteorologist and with the Weather Service, is here with us today to provide an update on drought conditions and the impacts on wildfire threats. Brad Peterson, a longtime grape grower who is shaping some of the important conversations about water use in vineyards and wineries, will be reporting on the drought initiatives by our local wine industry and its efforts to make Sonoma County the nation's first 100% sustainable wine region. And we will be joined by Jeremy Pearsall, a rural development specialist with the Rural Community Assistance Corporation. Jeremy has some valuable information on programs available to support private well owners, including resources for people whose wells have run dry. At the end of the presentations, we've made time to answer as many of your questions as we can. There are 3 ways that you can pose questions to our panelists. If you joined us on Zoom, please type your questions into the Q&A box. If you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, you can type questions into the comments area below. You are also welcome to email questions to our public affairs team at publicaffairs@sonoma-county.org. So let's get started. The end of the year is a time to look back at the challenges that we've faced over the last 12 months and to look forward to the opportunities that lie ahead. In the hydrological world, the water year ends on September 30th, which is coming right up. Actually, it's past. And boy, did we face some challenges in the last water year. And while we were blessed with a series of storms that began in late October 2021 and brought us 26 inches of rain over a 10-week span, it certainly was not enough to end our historic drought. The first 8 months of 2022, January through August, were the driest in 128 years. Now, we did get about 2 inches of rain last month, but it is but it literally amounted to just a few drops in a rather empty bucket. In the end, the Russian River watershed received just 36 inches of rain over the course of the entire water year, nearly 20% below normal. This marks the third straight year that rainfall has been below average. As a result, water levels in our largest reservoir, Lake Sonoma, have dropped to just 44% of capacity. That's why we need to continue to conserve water. Water saved now is water that we can use later. And if we don't get rain this winter, we're going to need every drop of that water. There are many people in Sonoma County who don't receive their water from cities or water districts, but who rely on their well. I've been hearing from many well owners who are concerned about the drought and the possibility of their wells going dry. In fact, some wells are already drying up in various areas of the county with historic groundwater problems. One of our speakers today will be providing information on funding that's available for lower income well owners who need a new well. He will also tell you about free well assessments available to all people living in rural areas. Many well owners have recently received a letter from their Groundwater Sustainability Agency outlining a new fee to help fund work that is needed to keep groundwater levels healthy. We won't have a speaker discussing this topic today, but we do have someone available to answer your questions. Our GSAs have helpful websites if you would like more information. You can go to Sonoma County groundwater.org for links and resources. Again, that's Sonoma County groundwater.org. Some of you may also have questions about the Board of Supervisors' recent action to place a 6-month moratorium on new well permits. We did this because we have to update our well ordinance in response to evolving California case law that requires local governments to protect the health of rivers and other public trust resources. We want to make sure we do it right, and the moratorium will give us time to do that. We did make an exception for emergency wells, including projects to replace wells that have dried up. If you have questions, we'll try to answer them. I'm sure many of you have noticed the arrival of autumn. It's so beautiful out now, one of the most special times of the year in Sonoma County. The days are getting shorter, the temperatures are starting to drop. This is an excellent time to adjust your outdoor irrigation system. Your plants don't need as much water in the fall as they do over the summer. And next month, as plants go dormant, you can turn off your irrigation system entirely until spring. If you look in the Q&A box on Zoom and comments section in Facebook, we've added a link to a tool that would help you create irrigation watering schedules that are customized to your landscapes. This is a good time to add a rain sensor to your irrigation system, which will prevent unnecessary watering during and after rains. And if you've been thinking about taking out your lawn and replacing it with water-friendly plants, this is a terrific time to move forward. Many cities are now offering rebates to help with the cost of removing your lawn. And it also can help to offset some of the costs of your new garden. And I must admit, the plant sales are happening right now. You can find a list of these rebates and other great sources at savingwaterpartnership.org. That's savingwaterpartnership.org. And so please also take the opportunity to check your irrigation PVC pipes and valves. The temperatures that we've experienced sometimes have created havoc with our drip irrigation systems. So test those systems before you put them to bed for the winter. And now let's turn to our experts. We'll start with Brian Garcia, weather warning coordination meteorologist with the National Weather Service's Bay Area office. Brian has been a key partner for us, ensuring that we have advanced warning of critical weather conditions that pose threats to our county. So, Brian, are we going to get any rain this winter?
Great question, Supervisor Gorin, and thank you for that introduction. Really appreciate it. And thank you to Sonoma County for having me tonight. This is great opportunity to talk to the community, and it's wonderful to be here. So let's get right to it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get on the slideshow here. See if this actually goes. There it goes. At least it's thinking about it. I promise we practiced this before. Nice.
We love the internet.
Right, exactly. Let's try this again. I apologize, everybody. And so you don't have to watch me. Let's see here. I'm gonna try this and stop sharing. Okay. Apologies, everybody. Let me get that slideshow up one more time. We'll try this one more time. And while I wait for this to load up, a big shout out and thank you to our interpreters tonight, both ASL and Spanish language. You guys are great. Thank you.
Ryan, would you like me to try to share your screen, your slides? I can have a copy here.
Yeah, hold on, Ted. Just give me 1 second here. I'm going to try this one more time. Okay, now let me, let's try this. Share entire screen. And can you see it, Ted?
Yep, looks good, Brian.
Awesome, thank you so much. All right, apologies, technical difficulties, they never cease to amaze us. Okay, Sonoma County Drought Outlook for October 2022. Those are tonight's topics I'm going to go over. I have probably, well, now less than 10 minutes to rip through a ton of slides. So I apologize in advance for going so rapidly. I'll try to keep it to a few words with lots of pictures. So first off, I want to show you what we're looking at for fire weather conditions, since we are in the peak of fire season for the North Bay, and we just crossed the 5th anniversary of the 2017 devastation of those wildfires. This is what we call the energy release components. So it reads, it's a composite of the fuels to show how much, how ready the fuels are to carry fire, essentially. So that blue line that you see there, and I don't know if you can see my mouse, hopefully you can, this blue line here is what is occurring currently. The red line is our max levels for any given time of year. Down on the horizontal axis down at the bottom, those are the dates of the year. Then the gray background line there is average for the time of year. You can see the blue line is meeting the red or slightly exceeding as of yesterday's readings. So we are still very, very dry. One good offshore wind event, and we could have a significant wildfire move through the area again. So despite the rain that came in September, which is this dip here in the blue, we have dried out again, thanks to the dry conditions and warm weather. That said, the summer has been great for us for the most part, because we've had a deep marine layer across a lot of the county, whether at the coast or right up into the Santa Rosa Valley there. You can see here all of this blue, essentially that's cooler temperatures that this profiler is reading, that this sensor is reading out at the coast. And then the warmer temperatures are up above it. So with these cooler temperatures, we can remain a bit more moist, which is great to keep the fuels a little bit more moisture down in the lower levels. So that has helped us a lot this summer, stave off some of the fire weather concerns. So what's the outlook look like for the rest of October? So this outlook is the 6 to 10 day outlook. So October 19th through 23rd. On the left, you'll see the temperature outlook. On the right, you'll see the precipitation outlook. On the left there, it says above normal. So we have higher odds of being above normal temperature in that 6 to 10 day period. And when you look at precipitation, Sonoma County is in what we're calling the near normal in this graphic. And that means we have higher odds of being near normal for precipitation. So typically in October, we get a little bit of precipitation, and it looks like this October is going to be no different. So when we look at the 8 to 14 day outlook here, this is October 21st through 27th. We have near normal for temperatures, so things should start to cool down, as Supervisor Gorin was talking about, and how beautiful it is in fall in Sonoma County. And then above normal for precipitation. So we're looking at higher odds of being above normal for precipitation during the 21st through 27th. And it does look like there's a system trying to work its way towards us to bring us some rain, which would be great, which hopefully we could put a big dent in fire season and potentially put a fork in it, which would be really nice. Okay, so looking down the road a bit, and I understand that this chart is a little bit like an ink blot test, but this is what we look at for the El Nino Southern Oscillation. El Nino Southern Oscillation is the scientific phrase for El Nino and La Nina. And here you can see in the blue down low, these are La Nina conditions. The black dot and the black line is what is present. And then all of these lines going out to the right are model projections. And you can see here that, I should say, at the bottom here, you see ASO, SON, OND, and so on. Those are 3-month letters. So August, September, October, November, and so on. And you can see with the lines projecting out, we remain in La Nina through much of the winter, but it looks like we start to creep out of La Nina into what we call the neutral phase, or what I like to call La Nada. It looks like we creep out into that neutral phase towards the middle or late part of our wet season, which this could be very important for us going into the winter for next year's water supply. And so we'll talk about this a little bit in a minute. But typical La Nina winters, like we've seen the last 2 years, have sent the cooler and wetter conditions up over the north of us and kept us relatively dry. You can see here in this graphic, Sonoma County is really on the cusp. There are some La Nina years that Sonoma County can be wet, but most are dry. The average is more dry. So to show you this in a different way, you can see that in the blue bars, the La Nina probabilities are going down. And in the gray bars, that neutral probability is going up. And it really crosses each other in that February, March, April timeframe. Now, if we can get out of La Nina early enough, we should have enough time left in the wet season to reap the benefits of a neutral phase ENSO. So that's ENSO. And if we can do that, we can actually pick up some precipitation once we get towards February and potentially a miracle March or an amazing April. So that's what we're looking for. That's what we're hoping for the winter. So in terms of the official outlook that's going forward, I'm going to skip the temperatures. I'll just kind of pass by these, but rest assured that when you see the above, it's above, we have odds of being above normal for temperature during the winter. And then we may dip into equal chances, meaning equal chances is essentially the meteorological equivalent of a shrug. So precipitation for October, November, December, you can see here that we're actually in the equal chances. So there's nothing saying that we're going to be significantly below or above, which is great because earlier projections were that we were going to be below. Temperatures for November, December, January, above. Once we get into November, December, January for precipitation, this is where La Nina is trying to hold on to its last gasp of influence over the area. And right now the projections are to keep us below. I think once we see some more current forecasts come out later this month, we should see this start to sink down towards the core of the Bay Area or farther south. December, January, February, temperatures above normal. December, January, February for precipitation, you can see here again, we're still remaining below. But again, I think the newer projections, once we see those come out, we should start seeing that sink a little bit farther south. Because as we talked about with the La Nina projections coming out of La Nina in the middle of winter, we should start to see the opportunity for a little bit more precipitation. And then January, February, March, we'll probably see this sink down to the south as well as we get closer, as we get the new projections out later this month. So February, March, April timeframe, this is when the models really said we're going to start coming out of La Nina. And so we should start to see this wane as well. And then March, April, May, this is where we saw La Nina really gone. And you can see below normal really kind of starts to be more in the desert Southwest than up towards North Bay. So what's that mean for the drought outlook? Well, the latest release of the seasonal drought outlook was on September 30th. And so this goes for October, November, December. And it essentially says drought persists across the area. So no significant improvement in drought. So for my end of things, what I'm looking at is, yes, we're going to be in drought through this winter. And when we go into next summer, we'll continue to be in drought. However, I think we'll see some slight improvements in the drought as we come out of this winter, because I'm looking at potentially getting some rain once we get into February, March, and April. So you can hold me to those projections and then call me up when it's all done, and we'll see how it plays out. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it. Supervisor Gordon, back to you.
Thank you, Brian. I guess that's good news for all of us for the next couple of weeks. We're going to have perfect weather for the last hikes and excursions out to the coast with our families, and maybe even have a dry Halloween for the trick-or-treaters. It's not good for rainfall, but it's good for our families, absolutely. Next, we'll hear from Brad Peterson, a board member with the Sonoma County Wine Growers. His family has been growing grapes in Sonoma County for 4 generations. Today, he serves as vineyard manager for 2 wineries, Silver Oak and Toomey, that are among the leaders in a movement to build sustainability practices in every step of the winemaking process. Thank you all. I'm starting to see some questions in the chat. Keep them coming. We'll try to answer them or save them for our Q&A session after our experts panel is done. So Brad, tell us, how is the drought impacting local wineries and what are they doing about it? I think our harvest is almost done. That's good news, but what's next?
Very close to done, yes. Thank you very much for that introduction. Yes, we are, the winery and vineyard industries are suffering through the drought just like everybody else. And we're doing everything we can to preserve those resources, our soil, our water. We're tied to the land. We can't very well pick up and move elsewhere. So it's very important for us to conserve those resources and do everything we can. So I'm going to share my screen here and show you a little bit about what we're doing. So the first thing in a sustainable water, a sustainable vineyard farming plan is to know how much water you have available and where's it coming from. So if it's groundwater, monitoring that well to see what the depth is doing, if it's going up, if it's going down. A lot of the vineyards in Sonoma County are actually irrigated with stored rainfall, winter rainfall when we get it. And that's stored in irrigation ponds. So being able to tell how much is in there. And then some of the vineyards are irrigated through water rights that are issued by the state of California. A lot of those are along our streams and rivers. And the state monitors those and tells us exactly how much we can pump, when we can pump that, and then what we can do with it. It has to be used for a beneficial use. So that's very important things to know. And then, of course, if there's not enough water in Lake Mendocino or Lake Sonoma, those water rights can be curtailed, and they have been curtailed for many, many growers along the Russian River over the last 2 years. So I mentioned well monitoring. This is one of the devices that we use that monitors the depth of our aquifer, puts a sound pulse down that well casing, and then it measures the amount of time it takes for it to bounce back. And so we can get a graph of that. The graph is there on the right-hand side of the screen, and it shows 4 years worth of data. So it does, this particular aquifer does drop as the season goes on, and then it comes back up as soon as we get winter rainfall. So you can see there at the end of the year, it recovers very quickly. It's a very steep increase. And overall, you can see there was a kind of a high peak in 2019, which was a very wet year. But overall, this aquifer is very stable. It responds very well, recovers very well. So it's not being overdrafted. In the vineyard, of course, we want to put on the minimum amount of water that we can. We don't want to put on any more than we need to grow the shoots that we need to ripen the crop load. And to do that, we monitor the soil moisture, so we know how much is in that soil to start with. And hopefully Brian's right there and we get some spring rainfall. That'll help refill that soil moisture. We also monitor shoot growth, which, as I said, we only want to grow enough canopy to ripen the crop load. Extra shoot growth just means more work for us and more expense. We also monitor vine water status. So how much water is that vine using throughout the course of the season? We've got quite a few different ways that we monitor that. And then, of course, as you mentioned, on irrigation systems for residences, we do the same thing in the vineyard. So we're out multiple times a year checking those drip systems for leaks, making sure that they are working efficiently and they're working the way that they're supposed to. So we have flow meters on all of our a lot of our wells that tell us how much water we're pumping, and then exactly how much we know from system designs how much that block should be using, so we can compare those. Another thing that we do is to irrigate at night, which helps reduce evaporation. So putting that water right on the base of the vine where it needs to be and putting it on where it'll do the most good. This is a soil moisture monitoring, as I mentioned, is really important. This is one of the weather stations that we use out in the vineyard. We have these at most all of our ranches, measure rainfall, temperature, quite a bit of other information. And we know that 7 to 8 inches of rainfall in the spring will refill that soil profile right up to where we need to start the season. And anything beyond that percolates down through that soil and refills those aquifers. So anything over 8 inches of rain goes right back in on every acre of vineyard to refill those aquifers. During the course of the season, those vines are going to require another 1/4 to 1/2 of an acre foot per acre of vineyard to get those vines to harvest. And that's coincidentally about what the average household uses, is about 1/4 to 1/2 of an acre foot per year. This is a picture of one of our soil moisture probes. You can't see much of it because it's all underneath the ground down where it's doing what it needs to do. And if there is sufficient water available down there, then there's no need to irrigate. And this slide shows how that looks over the course of a season. You can see the rain events and the irrigation events where it bumps up, and then the vine slowly takes that water back out of the soil. We did one irrigation there at the end of May to kind of get those shoots to where we needed them to be. I can show you that on the next slide. But then throughout the next month and a half to 2 months, 3 months, very little irrigation. So we didn't irrigate really seriously again until just before harvest in August. And then you can also see on the far right side that 1.5 inches of rain that we saw back in September does show up here. It only made it down to about 2 feet or so. So we need a little bit more rain than that. As I mentioned, shoot growth. We go out in the vineyard, we pick representative vines out of different blocks. We'll flag a couple of shoots off of those vines. We'll measure them throughout the season to see how those vines are progressing, how they're growing. You can see in May they started to flatten out a little bit. And that was an indication that they didn't quite have enough water to keep those vines growing. So we have a little bit of an irrigation and it shot those shoots up to where we needed them to be. Some of the technology that we use out in the vineyard, we use sap flow monitoring. It actually monitors the flow of the sap through the vine. If there's quite a bit of sap flowing, then there's no need to irrigate. There's plenty available. If the sap is flowing very slowly, then that's an indication it may need irrigation. Pyrometers actually measure the opening of the stomates on the backside of the leaf. If they're wide open, the vine has plenty of water. If they're closed down very tightly, that's an indication of vine water stress, and we may need to irrigate a little bit. And then on the right side is another piece of technology that measures the evapotranspiration over a larger area of the field. So then we can tell what's going on throughout that whole vineyard block. Moving into the winery, we're doing everything we can to conserve winery there. So in our new production facility that was completed in 2017, all the water that's used in production for washing tanks, for washing floors, et cetera, all gets recycled. It all goes back into a membrane bioreactor for treatment, where it comes back out and we can reuse it. So we do use recycled water wherever possible. Initial wash down of tanks, equipment, floors, et cetera, is all done with recycled water. In our office areas, using a combination of recycled water and low water use fixtures, we've reduced potable water use by almost 74% in the winery offices and almost 97% in the tasting room areas. When that water when we get too much of that recycled water, then it does go back into the vineyard for irrigation, either in the vineyard or landscaping, and that helps offset well water. All the landscaping at the new facility is also native and adapted plants, and it's all irrigated if it needs to be with recycled water. This big, huge, what looks like a big shipping container is actually the membrane bioreactor, MBR. And all the wastewater from the winery, the production side, goes into this. It uses a biological process to remove the organic material and other solids from the wastewater. And then that can be fined and cleaned up a little bit more and UV treated. And then it can go back into the winery, as I said, for washing down anything that we need to do in there. And by using this, we've reduced our potable water use by 37%. This is just a picture of one of our recycled water stations. These are throughout the winery. Again, and they use recycled water for all of that. Landscaping, as I said, is all drought tolerant. These bioswales, these landscaping swales that line each side of our driveway going in, have actually been excavated down to 4 feet. They're filled with drain rock, and then a membrane is put on top, and the topsoil is put back in to plant the landscaping in. And what that does is allows anything that runs off to run down into these bioswales and then percolates back into the aquifer. So rather than having water run off the property and down into the streams, it's all collected there and it all goes back into the aquifer. And that concludes my presentation. So thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Brad. And I know there were a couple of questions in the Q&A about the number of vines that they see all over the county, and we'll give you a chance to respond to that during the Q&A part of it. But we know that we're all in this together, and it's inspiring to hear how things, hear about the things that the wine industry is doing to reduce its use of water.
Absolutely. If we're going to make it through this drought, it's going to have to be a collaborative effort.
So next, let's hear from Jeremy Pearsall, Rural Development Specialist with the Rural Community Assistance Corporation. His communities his West Sacramento nonprofit provides training, technical, and financial resources to help rural communities achieve their goal and visions. Today, Jeremy will tell you about some of its resources for well owners. Jeremy, help us out of the situation that we find ourselves in.
Thank you, Supervisor. And yes, I'm with Rural Community Assistance Corporation. which is based out of Sacramento, and I'm the lead implementer for our private well program, which I'll discuss towards the end of my presentation. I do want to give a shout out into the chat room to Deborah Almazan and Ying Lau, who are with me as well. Deborah is a loan officer with our loan fund, and Ying works with her out of our Sacramento office. I'm coming to you today from Meridian, Idaho, so I'm 700 miles to the east, and very much paying attention to Brian's presentation for the Outlook because we work throughout the Western United States. So with that, I will bring my presentation up and we'll get started here. Let's see. Just take one moment and it should come up. There we go. So I wanted to start by just kind of profiling that we're going to go over 3 programs today, 2 of which will be from our loan fund, and then the last one, which is from our environmental department, which is where I work. So we have 3 programs. One's called the DWS. You'll hear me refer to that, the Decentralized Water System Loan and Grant Program. That does also include septics. Then we have our California specific program, the Clean Drinking Water Well Replacement Program, and then the Individual Well Program. So let's begin with the Decentralized Water System Loan and Grant Program. This was formerly known as what we'd always commonly refer to as the HWWS Loan and Grant Program. If you go to our website, it's still called that, but it is undergoing a name change. This is a program that RCAC, which I should have said stands for Rural Community Assistance Corporation, we do that in partnership with USDA Rural Development. So under this program, this is for folks is primarily low income folks, and we do find that under today's standards, it's pretty restrictive because the income levels and the thresholds are so low. This may change. That's because the income levels are still set off of the 2010 census data. They are hoping to update that pretty soon. Essentially, this is about the income threshold is based off about 80% of the state's median household income. So in order to be eligible for this program, you must own and occupy the home. This is going to be a common theme with our loan programs. That means if you're renting it out to somebody else, that's not going to be eligible. That income threshold is quite low at $37,730 in order to receive a grant, and these are considered emergency programs, so that is to rehab existing. It's not going to fund new infrastructure like new homes or new small water systems. If the successful applicant does receive a grant or a loan, low interest, below market loan, if they move or vacate that house or transfer property within 5 years, you must repay that back in full after completion. So this will provide, the decentralized water system will provide grants up to $15,000. And as I mentioned, it's to refurbish or redrill a failed well. It does cap at $15,000, and yes, I know that we've been seeing prices way exceed that. So, but you can get another 1% loan on the next $15,000 for a total of $30,000 in funding. And you have a maximum term of 20 years, so that can lower those payments for folks in need. The program that you're probably going to be more interested in, and these are together on the same website, is the California Clean Drinking Water Well Replacement Program. Now, this is set to provide financial assistance for homes and small systems. When we talk about small water systems, we mean between 2 connections and 15. If you're over 15, you're going to be regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act as a community water system. This program, currently, they've increased limits to fund up to $60,000 for individual wells and $100,000 for small water systems. This is provided with a grant from the California State Water Board, which our CAC does administer through our loan fund. Again, similar to the DWS program, the applicant will need to own and occupy the home. And if that home is sold or transferred or leased within the next 5 years, that will need to be repaid back in full at the time. Once again, new home construction is also not going to be available for funding. But you notice that income threshold is a little, is a little bit higher, and it's at 62,938, which I believe is the new MHI for the state of California. Although we are looking at hoping to expand that income threshold with the state right now, but that is to be determined in the future. So stay tuned, and when I share the links to the program webpage, watch it for updates. So if you're a small system, the eligibility, again, that's going to be for that 2 to 15 home range, 2 to 15 connection size, that small system. And these are going to have to be owned and occupied. And as I mentioned, community water systems are not going to be eligible. Community water system defined as 15 connections serving more than 25. And I did change this up. It is, and if you do have more than one connection on a small system, they're going to take the average. I believe they're going to take the average of those incomes rather than pegging it to one home. And you can see that income threshold is higher than that decentralized water program. So you go to the website, you can find the application for both. There are a few other caveats with this program that you should consider. The proposed work must be completed within 1 year of executing the grant or loan agreement. Now, sometimes it takes a while to get bids. Contractors, we find, are really backed up, and I'm sure Deborah can speak to that. But this is after the closing, so we need to have it installed and have a plan in place within that 1 year. If you need treatment devices to meet state water quality standards, we're going to make sure that those any wells that are drilled are up, are going to, and systems that are put in are going to meet those state water quality standards and state and local well construction standards as well. There is our team on the environmental side will come out and inspect those before and after the project. And again, that payment is going to be due within in full upon sale or transfer of the property within that 5-year time frame. I have put this here. We want to make this PowerPoint presentation available to folks who are attendees. So you've got this contact information and the links, but this is for our loan fund contacts for Deborah and Ying, and they are both here today and will be available in that question and answer session as well as myself. This slide here, I just wanted to put it in for the attendee sake. These are the links to our programs and then the flyers that really kind of have the bullet points for you. The final program I wanted to talk about briefly is the one that I lead implement, and it's the individual well assessment program. Here, we are talking about more of a vulnerability assessment on your well, go over best practices. What we're going to do here is come out on a site visit, go through and go over a well assessment tool that's built off of a sanitary survey form. This is a program we do in partnership with the University of Illinois and a few other partners nationally. What we'll want to do is work with the homeowner, have them on site, and go over what their existing well. I'll go to the next slide. We're going to research your well. We'll try to find your well driller's report for you if you don't have it already. Go over what that means. We're going to walk through we're going to walk through the property, look for some potential hazards to your source water, and go over ways to protect it. We do have free resources, both in hard copy and digital versions, and in English and in Spanish. And this last year, we've started testing for coliform bacteria, nitrates, and arsenic on a limited basis. This program is limited for 13 states. So when we do that intake form, please offer a statement of reason, like if you're a contaminant concern you're looking for to move you up on that priority list. We have some eligibility restrictions right now in place for this. We're not going to go assess anything that's not for domestic use. That means if a well is dedicated for irrigation or agriculture, those are not eligible for this program. This is for homeowners for the water that they're drinking. Nitrate is an acute contaminant for drinking water. If you have a shared well, those small systems, we can come out and look at that shared well. However, we need legal access to the property. Oftentimes our assessors must drive an hour and a half to get there, and we need to be able to go there and not find it's in somebody else's backyard. if repeat applicants are probably going to be lower priority. And this is a grant funded through the Environmental Protection Agency. And so it has a limited budget. So we try to maximize our resources to reach the need. We are finding, as you might realize, we're seeing increased demand throughout the Western United States. And with that, I wanted to leave a few links for folks here today. This is, you can look at our program website, kind of look at the overview of the program on the top link above. But that online assessment form, there's a direct link to it here. It's pretty easy to fill out, and we'll get it to one of our local California teams, to our assessor teams. I put that online request on multiple slides because that's the best way to get that out there. This is my direct contact information. I'm available through phone or email. And I really thank you for having me here today. Thank you. Back to you, Supervisor.
Jeremy, thank you so much. And I'm going to keep your contact information around because I know that a few folks have already outreached to me, really concerned about their well drying up. Now, I know that many of you have questions, and we'll do our best to respond to as many as we can in the limited period that we have. Ted Apple, who is a member of our communications team, is here to give you a quick reminder of how you can pose questions for panelists and to get it started. So Ted, take it away.
Great, thank you, Supervisor Gorin. As the supervisor mentioned earlier, there are 3 ways that you can pose questions to our panelists today. If you're joining us on Zoom, please type your questions into the Q&A box. If you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, you can type questions into the comments area below the post. And you're also welcome to email questions to our public affairs team. The address is publicaffairs@sonoma-county.org. We have staff monitoring that inbox who will pass along those questions to us. So let's begin. There are a number of questions here from people who are concerned about vineyard development in the county and the amount of water that vineyards use. Brad, I'd like to address this question to you. Can you tell us how much water does it take to grow grapes, and how does that compare to other types of agricultural uses? Can you put this into context?
Sure. Typically, it takes about a third to a half of an acre foot of water per acre per year. And that can come from a lot of different sources. It's not necessarily all groundwater. I don't have numbers for other crops. I'm not all that familiar with them, but vineyards are one of the more water efficient crops. If there were other crops that we could grow in Sonoma County and make a living at doing that, believe me, as farmers, we would be doing that. That's the reason that a lot of the acreage has transitioned out of apples, out of prunes, out of crops that were here before, is that they just become to a point where you can't make a living as a farmer doing that.
Great, thank you for that. I'm also seeing a number of questions from people who are concerned about the Potter Valley project. And this might be a question for Don. Don, are you with us today?
Yeah, Ted, I'm here.
Great, thanks. Don, for those of us who don't know Don, Don's principal engineer at Sonoma Water. And Josh has emailed us a question. Why is Lake Pillsbury in the Mendocino National Forest still not 100% safe from being torn down? Water storage is such an important part of making it through the dry months. At this point, it would seem we need all the reserves of water that we can get.
Well, I'll take a shot at answering that. One thing I would point out is that PG&E is now in the process of being required by FERC to prepare an application to surrender that project. So there's been no determination of what's going to happen to Scott Dam, which forms Lake Pillsbury. But I think a couple of the drivers that will occur over the next several years is PG&E prepares that application and decides on what's going to be the outcome of those facilities that are part of the project. A couple things to point out is
Great. Thank you, Don. I appreciate that. Supervisor Gorin, I'm not sure if this question should go to you. There's also concern about water use by the cannabis industry. Is this a significant problem in Sonoma County?
Well, I think neighbors have some significant concerns about where cannabis is cultivated, and the cultivators certainly have challenges negotiating and working their way through the permit system. But the fact is that the number of acres in cannabis cultivation currently, or last year, is actually very small. It's about almost 50 acres throughout the county. And of course, this compares with the apple acreage of about 2,200 acres, wine and grapes cultivation about 57,000 acres, olives about 400 acres. And so it is still a very small amount of acres planted in cannabis. And I know cannabis is more water consuming plants and a number of harvests than the grape harvest, but nevertheless, it's still a very small part of who we are and what we do. And you can get more information about all the crops being cultivated in Sonoma County, and just Google on the 2021 Sonoma County Crop Report, and you can do a lot of research on that.
Great, thank you. Brian, people are fascinated with the weather. One of the questions, how rare is it to get a triple dip La Nina?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks, Ted. The triple dip La Nina is very rare, actually. So back-to-back La Ninas aren't very rare because that happens on a fairly normal basis. But when we go into triple dip, it's like, all right, what's going on here? A quad dip is extremely rare. I don't think I've ever seen one of those in my lifetime. And I'm trying to think back through the records to think if we've seen that happen before, but I can't think of a time. I'm running through numbers in my head, I apologize. But triple dip is on the rare side. So moving out of this winter and into winter of 23-24, we, statistically speaking, we should be in an El Nino or at least a neutral phase going into that winter, which are a lot better for us locally with rainfall.
Great, thank you. That's helpful. Jeremy, I have a question for you, or perhaps for your colleague Deborah. A number of people are who have wells are wondering about the cost. What trends are you seeing in the cost of drilling wells in your region, in our region?
Oh, boy. The cost of drilling wells can run in your region, I would say anywhere from maybe 45 to 70 and above. Okay, but we are capped for the state grant at 60,000 for individual households. Anything above that expense would be, of course, to the homeowner. And then, of course, the other program that we have, the DWS program for the state of California, I don't think in the area, the income for the whole state cannot exceed the 37,730. We are hoping for that to go up, but that could be any time from now to next year. Yeah, so it's a little disheartening, but that's what we know for now.
Great. Thank you for that information.
Absolutely.
We're right up here at 5 o'clock now. We've allocated an hour for this. Supervisor Gorin, are there any other topics or questions that you would like to address here today?
Well, there was a question which I think is relevant and important, and that is we find ourselves in a rapidly changing climate. And although we're talking about La Nina and historic droughts of 1, 2, 3 years, maybe Brian could comment what that means within the context of climate change. What can we expect as we heat up a little bit more? Can we expect more rainfall? What does that really mean for Sonoma County?
Sure, and I apologize about my video here. It's the blur is awkward. There we go. Just turn that off. That's a really good question, Supervisor Gorin. When we talk about climate, California is a land of extremes just in general. We see big drought years, we see big wet years, and typically we finish big drought times with big flood times. Not always, but it typically happens. If you think back to winter 16-17, we had a back-to-back La Nina, and then we had a weak La Nina going into late 16. And once we turned into 2017, we got inundated with rain, and we had some major floods across Sonoma County. As we start to see the impacts of climate change continue to take hold, what we're likely to see more and more of are more of those extremes. So those extremes will swing even farther. So we'll get more extreme droughts, longer, deeper, heavier droughts, hotter summers. We could even see some colder winters mixed in there. And we can see some really, really big floods as well. So I would say if there's something to prepare for the next 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years and beyond, is we need to learn how to live in a land of increasing extremes.
Thank you, Brian. And I had heard that, and I'm glad that you confirmed it. I hope that our community is reassured that the Sonoma Water and the groundwater sustainability agencies are planning for a number of projects in the next year, looking at stormwater capture, potentially to infiltrate into the groundwater because it is being threatened, and maybe aquifer storage and recovery. So we're doing a lot of research on the best places to finance those projects that will really help us in the future. But in the meantime, the word is conserve water and check your irrigation systems. You might volunteer to be one of our volunteer monitoring applicants for our well program. I know that we have a number of them in Sonoma Valley to check the quality of groundwater around you and in our county and community. But it is important to pay attention, and that message of conservation will not go away. It's our most economic and efficient way of getting a new water supply. Sharing, conserving water for everyone.
Great. Thank you. I think that's a wonderful note to conclude on. I want to thank our panelists for sharing their expertise with us today and our audience for all the great questions. Copies of today's slideshows, along with a video recording of this town hall, will be available on the drought page at socoemergency.org/drought. This is an excellent resource, by the way. If you haven't been there yet, you'll find lots of information there that can help you thrive during this drought, whether you get your water from a city or you live in a rural area and rely on a well, or you work in agriculture. Visit socoemergency.org/drought. Please join us again on November 10th for our final Drought Town Hall of the year. If there are topics that you would like us to address, please email your suggestions to our public affairs team. That's at publicaffairs@sonoma-county.org. Thank you so much again, and have a great evening.
And thank you.